Hi, this is the Pennsylvania Coalition of Public Charter Schools with our show Growing Up Charter. I'm Dr. Annie Clark. I'm joined today by Beth Jones, and we're so excited that you're here to talk to us about charter schools and finance. Welcome, Beth.
Thanks, Dr. Clark. Happy to be here.
Oh, that's great. Could you tell us a little bit about your background in charter schools and what you're doing now?
Sure. Yep. So charter schools first came on my radar way back in 1998 when I was a young mom and I was starting a school search for my oldest son, who's now 28 years old. He would have been, half-day program in our local district. Trying to plan for our town. And this was the first time I had ever heard about charters. And if we all remember back to 1998, the internet wasn't what it was, but I did do some searching on there and I was able to find some information about charters and how they just started in Pennsylvania, but how they had already been in Minnesota for a while. And I was psyched. I was like, oh, this might be it. And after the first meeting, I was hooked. I became a founder. I don't do anything partially, right? I became a founder of the school, which is Collegium Charter School, now located in Exton. And I sat on the inaugural board for a couple of years. And after that, I moved into, after a brief break between being on the board, I moved into employment as a director role at the school, where I oversaw HR, communications, parent relations and enrollment, and on the food service department. And as the school grew and as my responsibilities grew as well, so after a while, the business office was added to my area of responsibilities and my title was changed to Chief Operating Officer, COO. In 2017, I left Collegium, and in 2018, I started working for a brand new cyber charter school, Insight PA, which is where I am today. I started my work at Insight as a CFO, but I now serve as Insight's COO, so I'm back on the operating side of things, and I'm also serving as our interim CFO. And along the way, working in charters, I became involved in PCPCS, and first on the advisory council and then to the board. Mm-hmm. You know, in addition to my work experience related to charters, both of our sons are charter school graduates. Yeah. And, I've seen the trajectory. I feel like I've been so fortunate because I've seen the trajectory of so many children and so many families change for the better. In part because the educations those kids received in a charter school and the choice that families had available to them to pick a school that would best serve their children's needs. So, when I get a little frustrated in my day-to-day, I always try to remember those kiddos who I know would not be where they are today without the path that a charter school was able to help them, help provide for them.
Wow. You, like so many charter school leaders, have a personal connection to our schools. And it's amazing that your journey was similar to mine, that we both started out as parents wanting something better or different for our students. And I think we both knew that we had lots of options, and we still chose charter because we believed it was the right fit at the right time for our students. Tell me a little bit about that, about just going from being this parent, which is the most important role, to now really being, in charters for all these years, really the history of charter schools, really. How would you encourage other parents to sort of follow in your footsteps?
Well, I think it's critical that families are involved in their children's education to the extent that it is meaningful and beneficial to their family and also to the schools that they want to be involved in. I was fortunate at the time we were starting Collegium. I had the ability to work part-time and also dedicate myself to the school's founding. Not everybody has that amount of time to dedicate. So I always tell parents, like, what works for you? What are you interested in? Where are your skill sets? What do you want to learn more about? And how much time do you have for this? And then I try to find a volunteer opportunity that might work for them, because I get it. Parents are very busy. The main job of raising your children, but you also got to go to work. You got to keep a household running. You may have elder care responsibilities with parents. You may have younger children too that aren't school age yet. And so all those competing priorities come into play. And some folks, it may be, once a month for 10 minutes, and that's what they can do, but that's great. Be connected that way, right? For other folks, maybe they can do something on a weekly basis. Whatever works for your family. That's really the key. And that schools should be flexible enough to try to offer a variety of opportunities for families to participate in the school community.
I love that you ended that with saying, really, that the schools need to be welcoming places and accept what parents can give. I agree with you. If a parent has 10 minutes, I think that's so pivotal. Even if they just show up for an event, means a lot to the school, and it definitely means the world to the student. What advice would you give other school leaders to welcome more parents? Because actually, that's the one thing that our school leaders do want to know about, is parent engagement and how to get parents into the building. Do you have any advice for them?
So Dr. Clark, part of your question cut out a little bit, but you were asking about what my thoughts are on encouraging parents to be engaged in for schools and stuff. And I think my advice to schools would be kind of what I said towards the end of the question about parents is, try to have a variety of opportunities available for all parents, at a variety of skill, some people might want to serve on your board and may be great and capable board members. For other folks, they want to come in and help in a classroom. For other folks, they need to do something at home because of other responsibilities. So for schools, I think it's promoting a variety of opportunities, promoting to families that all are welcome, and that schools are willing to work with families to find a way for their interests and skill sets and time to kind of fit into the school setting. Schools also have to be aware that families or parents that are in the school or working anywhere near kids have to have their clearances, and that's a state law. And for some families, that's a barrier. It's a barrier to volunteering in their school community. So to me, that puts the onus back on the school to find opportunities for ways for those families to still participate while still, meeting the requirements of the state law.
Yes, I love that. I love that you put that in, and we did that. I'm glad that your school does that and you believe that. We did that at our school as well before coming into the coalition, was finding those opportunities that a parent could support their individual child and not supervise other children. So there are ways that you can do that. So thank you for bringing that up. We're going to move into the conversation of finance and charter schools, just because you have that expertise. And a lot of our charter schools can struggle with that because, we have different types of leaders, some who came from being principals to CEOs, and not every school has a COO or a CFO. So one of the first questions I wanted to ask you was, can you just give us your philosophy around financing charter schools?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
I think it's finance in charter schools is different from finance in the corporate world, right? And it's also a little bit different from finance in a traditional public school district or nonprofit. I will say that traditional public school district finance and nonprofit finance is probably a little bit more closely aligned to charter school finance than corporate finance is. And that has to do with, what a school or an entity's philosophy is regarding their finances is all about what their main goals are. And so in the corporate world, a goal typically tends to be tied to earning a profit. But school management is first and foremost, at least in my mind, is about ensuring that needs are met for students, for your employees, for the families that you serve. And you ensure that those needs are met by making sure that appropriate funding is available to ensure that the programming is available to meet those needs. So it's, it's profit as opposed to needs. And I think if you're coming into school finance, of course, you always have to pay attention to, excuse me, just the balance between revenue in and expenses out, right?
Right.
You've got to pay attention to that bottom line, but your driving force should be, are you meeting the needs? And if you're not, and you need more money to do that, you've got to figure out a way to get more money or to reprioritize the needs or to restructure things. There's a lot of different ways to take a look at things. But it starts with making sure the needs are met.
I love that. I think that's a great explanation. And I think that's something tangible that our school leaders could think about. Is your budget meeting the needs of your students and your employees? So I love that you said it just that way. I think that's really helpful. Tell us a little bit about, in your role as COO, but then also as interim CFO, how do you oversee a school's finance?
Sure. Well, so to me, it all starts with building your plan, which is a budget, right? And the budget needs to be a collaborative and a transparent process that includes connecting the work to the school's goals and the school's programs. And then once that budget work is done, it's about sticking to the budget, but also having flexibility to consider requests for outside of budget expenses and having a process for that consideration. It includes regularly monitoring, and by regular, I mean like on a weekly or a monthly basis, whatever works for your school and your school's programs, but regularly monitoring the expenses out and the revenue in, so that you, as the main finance leader of the school, can alert the rest of leadership and the board to any significant changes that might happen between revenue and expenses and the plan, that budget. And then it's also really important to make your money work for you. If you have reserves, get them invested in accordance with state regs. As a public school, there's very specific regulations about how we can safely invest our reserve funds. For example, we cannot be just in the stock market, right? Even though that may promise the greater returns, there's also greater risk there. So there's laws that govern that to really help minimize the risk associated with investing our reserves. And then, I do all of this by holding weekly meetings with our rep from our financial service vendor, and that's Charter Choices. And then I also have a monthly conversation with our board treasurer and our CEO and our monthly board finance committee. So it's really making sure that all the different pieces of the school organization have opportunity to provide input to the budget, to changes to the budget, to talk about how the money's being spent. And I can't say enough about Charter Choices as a financial services vendor. As much expertise as I may bring, given the experiences that I've had, they have a lot more. And I find them very valuable, in the very least, to bounce an idea off of. But then it grows from there to they sort of have their finger on the pulse of what's happening across the state in charter schools, so they can talk about what has been tried, what has worked, what hasn't, what maybe a best practice has been, what's something really innovative that's going on, and that we can learn from. So, I would say hand in hand with our vendor, that's how I oversee the school's finances.
I really appreciate that you bring that up, because I do believe that for our charter schools, it's really important to have a trusted vendor that at least, if the minimum, that they're your think partner, if not more, just because school finance is so critical for keeping your charter school open, getting through renewal, sustainability, and it's right back to making sure that budget really does meet the goals of the school. So I agree with you. Both Charter Choices and OmniVest have been great partners to the Pennsylvania Coalition and to our charter schools in PA, which we love that. How did your previous roles sort of prepare you for where you are? So, and as for us, we have a lot of school leaders who are coming up through our emerging leadership program. And if you could just tell us, how did this journey prepare you?
So I think my journey has been one that is both theoretical, the education component, and then also very practical with a side order of like trial by fire, right?
Yes.
So, I went to school originally to be a teacher, and I was a kindergarten teacher in a traditional public school district for a number of years. And I realized that traditional bureaucracy is not for me. And so I ended up doing some work that I call education adjacent. I was a child care and parenting counselor for a for-profit organization for a number of years before starting the charter school and getting back involved in charter school, or getting involved in charter education. So I have, and then along the way, I ended up going back to school for my master's degree and for my MBA. So I have a master's in ed and a master's in business. And then I also have my principal cert. So I have all those theoretical experiences, but then I have the practical, right? When you're starting a charter school, especially when we started Collegium, that was in the early days of charters in Pennsylvania. And, I kind of say, remember the wild, wild west? And, there were definitely situations where we had no guidance. There either wasn't a regulation about it or nobody had done it yet. And so we just had to try some things. And there also wasn't a ton of oversight at that time. There's a lot more scrutiny, a lot more oversight. So a lot of it was, I gained experience by trying something. And that's that innovation component that is embedded in the charter school law in Pennsylvania. You've got to try things. And I feel like I've learned so much from the actual experience of doing the work and getting things started.
I love that you brought up that innovation is in the law of our charter school. I just highlighted this the other day, just because I think this is something that's true in all of our charter schools. They're very innovative, and yet I would like to see us push to the next level of that. And so when you think about that, like, what's some advice you could give school leaders to push themselves back to those early days when it was the Wild Wild West? I agree with you. What advice do you have for school leaders?
Yeah, I recognize that it's difficult because when the law was created and innovation was embedded in there was not the emphasis that there is today on standardized testing. Now, luckily, the pendulum is starting to swing back more towards the middle with looking more at performance, or at growth and achievement as opposed to just straight out achievement, right? We're looking at individual student growth as opposed to where they are, on some sort of scale, right? We want to see that kids are improving year over year, but still there is an emphasis on standardized testing. And unfortunately, when I look back in the rearview mirror, I can see a clear change. When the emphasis on standardized testing came, some of those innovative things went away because focus needed to be, unfortunately, on prep for the test. And it would be great if we could find a balance. All too often in education, and I think this is probably in other industries as well. I just don't have the experience in these other industries. We swing from one end of the pendulum to the other instead of trying to find a middle ground that better suits everyone's needs. So, I think when a school leader is thinking about ways to innovate, unfortunately, they have to try to do it around the requirements of standardized testing. They still need to make sure that they're meeting those needs and meeting all the other requirements. But, innovation doesn't have to be huge. Innovation can be a small part of something you're already doing. And you can do incremental changes in order to make it more manageable within the organization, and also to help it best work alongside all the other competing priorities that an organization and a leader has.
I love that. And you're right, that little small sustained change makes a big difference over the course of a few months, and then a school year, and then over 5 years. this does bring us to really managing budgets. And so
Mhm.
let's say that you were sitting down with one of our school leaders, and many are right now sitting down thinking about budgets for next year, right? What would like what are the sort of the materials, or what is the ideas that you bring together that you get a school leader thinking about when you're starting the budget process?
Yep. So when someone's starting budgeting, and if they are a school leader, I would hope that they've already had some experiences with budgeting, whether it's the theoretical, preparing a budget in a graduate program, or in practice. Maybe it's providing information up the chain to get inserted into the bigger school budget, or maybe it's preparing a departmental budget, right?
Mhm.
And so I would hope that somebody in leadership has done some of that work somewhere along the way. So it's really building on that, whether it's the theoretical or the practical experiences, and finding out where start with where is the school leader comfortable with their budget experience and practice. What did they enjoy about it? What did they find really difficult about it? What did they try already that they felt worked well? Why did that work well? What
Mhm.
did they try that maybe that didn't work so well? And then putting together a plan for how to develop a transparent and collaborative process. And unfortunately, sometimes people think that budgets are like a one and done thing. You collect the info, you put it in a spreadsheet, and boom, your budget is done. But to me, it's also about that back and forth. It's collaborating, collecting, putting it into the format, and then going back to those leaders that have provided the information and showing them how it looks. And either saying like, hey, we got it in here, and look, it looks like everything you want is going to be funded, or we do not have enough for all of this, and we need your help determining what are the priorities that align with the goals, so that we can have at a minimum a balanced budget going forward. And if the school leader, they need to develop processes that are clear, so that the input that comes in from all the other leaders or department heads within an organization, so they are thinking through all the different possibilities that might need to be included. So sometimes that's looking back at past budgets to see like, oh, what was included and how much did it cost? Do we still need these things? And if we do, is it going to be more or less in the coming year? And then it's also looking ahead with your goals in mind. Where do you want to be in a couple of years? And what do you need to do in the budget that you're preparing now in order to set yourself up appropriately to achieve the goals that you have set for your organization? So, again, it'd be nice if it's just like put the budget together and be done, but it's not. It's a regular process of constantly evaluating it to make sure that it's still on target. And when it's not, to alert the folks that need to know, so that you're either going to be better than budget or maybe not as good as you had hoped. And what do you need to do differently so that you can be break even by year end?
I really appreciate that. I think that was really helpful. And I love how you said it's that living document that the conversation needs to go back and forth. And I think that is a critical, because a lot of times you're right. You see where the school leader will ask the department head or chair for their budget. The budget's prepared, cuts are made, but maybe the school leader, I don't know. And then it sort of goes to the board, and then it stops there. But it stays with the financial people, but it doesn't really go back to, you're right, to the chair or to that department head to say, hey, yeah, you're right. You are in good shape. Here you are, or no, you're not. And really checking in to make sure that what we budgeted for last year is still the work that we're doing. And can we measure that work? And so I think that's really important. Our schools did have a large influx of funding over the last couple of years due to the COVID-19 pandemic. What do you think that means for schools coming, where they're going to go back to just, having their regular income? How does that happen when a school goes from having a lot of money to having lesser money? Do you have any advice for school leaders how to manage that or think about that?
Well, so fortunately, with all of the pandemic related funds, we were told up front, this is going to end, right? So
Right.
no school should have any delusion that it was going to continue. And so when you have money that you know is going to end, you should use it accordingly. And it may be as simple as like, oh, okay, this money's coming in and we can use it to supplant items in the budget. And, so any money that would normally be used in our general fund is going to just hit our bottom line, which means we have reserves. Great. So that allows the school to maybe build up some reserves for a rainy day, for a specific project, an emergency, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But oftentimes reductions happen unexpectedly. And those are the things that are way more challenging for a school leader. And that's why the regular monitoring of revenue in, expenses out is a critical component, because if you're not watching what's going on with your money on a regular basis, you're going to be surprised when all of a sudden you're at like in the 5th month of the school year and you're like, where are our revenues? Oh, it turns out all these school districts decided they weren't paying and you need to redirect. Right. And now most schools have a process for redirecting to the state to collect that money, but a newer school leader may not be super aware of that process, and that they need to do something in order to get that money to come in. So it all kind of goes back to recognizing your budget as a plan that's a living document that you need to constantly look at what's coming in and what's going out.
Thank you. I think that is really helpful.
And make adjustments accordingly.
Yes. I think that you bring up a great point. When our schools went through the budget impasse, I think schools did one of two things. I think they either did really well of realizing what they could live without and really diving back into those goals and saying, okay, what are we spending? What's our personnel? And does it meet those goals, and what can be cut away? And I know for our school, we never went back to that original budget. Like, we really stayed lean. And then with that money that we ended up having, then we were able to put it really back into good programming around student achievement and adding coaches, adding things that meant something to students in the classroom. What advice do you give?
Actually, Annie, if I could just kind of follow up on your follow-up.
Yes.
I feel as if surviving that budget impasse and all of the things that had to happen in order for the school that I was with at that time to remain sustainable and financially healthy. Like, I learned a ton of tricks then.
Yes.
And so I think sometimes when folks are bringing financial issues to me, they walk away with this sense of like, Beth didn't even seem concerned. Like, is she okay? Like, why is she not worried about this? And I think it all goes back to that, because I realized that, yeah, okay, you're asking for $1,000 in a $60 million budget. This is a huge thing, but in the grand scheme of things, we can handle this. This is a no-brainer. It's more that time back in when was that, like 2013 or
I'm thinking 15, 16 maybe. The 15.
Yeah, whenever that was. I mean, it was just right. It was 2015, 16, because that was also an incredible time of just some transitions at our school. So I was also managing all those transitions. So, I feel like those experiences have really helped temper my response to things and have made me a better financial leader for the rest of the folks in the organization when they need that financial guidance, to recognize that there's always a solution to the puzzle pieces of the school's finances. There's always something you can do.
I really appreciate that you added that, because you're absolutely right. If you stay in leadership long enough and people bring problems to you, you really will stay very calm, because you've seen it and you say, okay, how are we approaching this? And we stayed very collective and very driven. And through that, we're able to like really, really come out way further ahead in the end than where we started. So I agree with you. And the length and leadership time really helps you do that. You're like, okay, been here, we'll figure it out.
Right.
What do you think is the most important financial advice? You've given us a lot, but if you were sitting down with a brand new school leader, or somebody who's starting a charter school or wants to start a charter school, what would be like the number one thing you say, okay, this is what you have to do in finance? Like, what's that big one or two things?
Yep. So if I'm sitting down with a brand new school leader, I would say if they're just starting their charter school, I would say, don't do the PCERS pension. Get your required 403B set up as a benefit for your employee. You will save so much money in the long run. If I was sitting down with a school leader that still had PCERS, I would say transition all your new hires over to a 403B, because the difference there is just huge. You know, for every dollar that you pay an employee who's in the PCERS pension, you are paying right now 35 cents on that dollar into a PCERS pension fund. And it's not going direct to our employees. It's going into this overall pool of funds that has been depleted and is significantly underfunded due to the way that the whole pension program has been managed over the years. So that would be my big push. And the other piece of advice would be talk to Charter Choices or a similar vendor, but I would recommend Charter Choices. You know, they have having a financial vendor that has experience in Pennsylvania charter schools is very, very helpful when you're starting, or if you're a new leader, and even if you're an experienced leader and you just need some help with finances.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. I believe that you really need to bring a professional in to assist you with your finances. You will be grateful that you did. It will take so much stress off of the school leader. It allow them to focus on the work that they want to be doing, like, you know, around academics and vision and moving forward. Let's talk a little bit about the relationship between school leader and COO and even CFO. One of the things I really benefited from was having a very strong CFO in our organization. And now we work with Charter Choices, and that really helps me too. Can you talk about the sort of the dialogue that goes between the leader and the CFO about really growing the school and sustaining the school?
Yep. So just like there needs to be regular review by the CFO of the money in and the money's out, there needs to be regular conversations with the CEO and other C-suite leaders or executive leaders, however your school is structured, to really understand what their goals are for their programs and for the overall school, to make sure that the financial plan stays in alignment with those goals and really supports the needs of those programs. It's also recognizing that the CEO and the board determine what your priorities are. So, you know, I have my opinions, you know, about what I think our school should have. But as this, you know, serving right now as the interim CFO, that's not really my job to say yes to this and no to that. It's more like, okay, you are the leaders that have said yes to these things. I've got to figure out how to fund them. And if I can't figure that out, it's coming back to you and saying, this is what I can figure out to fund. Can we do it this way for this year and then try to fund the rest of what you want to do the following year? Or having similar conversations to come to compromise that work from a financial perspective, but also try to put them on a path to help meet the goals that they're setting for academics, or for, you know, maybe for HR, maybe increasing HR benefits, or whatever the goal for the school or the programs might be. But it's all about communication and regularly refreshing that budget plan when things change, whether it's the goals change or whether it's the revenue or the expenses are changing.
Oh, that's great. Yes, it's great. You touched a little bit about really the board's role in the budget and the dialogue there. Could you go a little bit deeper into great practices for our board members?
Sure. So every school and every board is a little different. And so you really have to find what is the right structure that works for that your particular organization, as well as the skill sets that each individual board member brings to the table. So, you know, we have an active finance committee of our board. and a treasurer. And so the treasurer is a board member. He leads the finance committee, and he, for some boards, that person would have to have some sort of background in finance, be an accountant or an auditor or something like that. Our chair of the finance committee is an attorney, so he has definitely has a strong understanding of reading financial documents and things like that, but a little bit of a twist on the background that many finance chairs have. I have a regular one-on-one meeting with him once a month. And then we have our finance committee meeting. And then he's also, being a liaison to the board to help explain things from a financial perspective that are going on. So we've got the treasurer, we've got me as the interim, and then we also have our rep from Charter Choices at our board meetings and our board committee meetings, so that they can assist as well with some of the very technical stuff, trying to explain how to read a balance sheet, or, some of the basics related to being on a board and needing what you need to know for finance. I think sometimes board members get shy away from maybe digging into the finances, because they'll say, like, I'm not an accountant, or I don't know how to read this, the cash flow statement or whatever. So I think it's very important when you're a finance leader in the school that when you're providing materials up to your board on a monthly basis, that not only does it include the balance sheet and the cash flow statement and that kind of stuff, the regular documents, but that it includes a little narrative or some bullet points that call out changes, that call out unusual things, or even just a statement like, hey, everything's pretty much status quo. So that if the charts aren't really their way of getting the information, that there's some words there that explain all those numbers and charts, so that you're kind of coming at it from two different angles, for the folks that maybe aren't super comfortable with the financial documents.
Yes,
I agree your question.
No, you did a great job, because I agree with you that, our boards need to have someone who has some type of financial knowledge. It really will help the organization to be sustainable and healthy. And then if you were talking about, back to a school leader, like what are some of the must keep records? Like everything financial you should keep, but a lot of our school leaders don't necessarily have a financial background. And so is there any practical knowledge that you could give them about what should they keep? How long should they keep it? Maybe where to organize it?
Yep. So my advice would be that if you do not have a records retention policy that stipulates what type of document and how long to hold it for and where to hold it, that should be your first priority. And while you're developing that records policy, don't throw anything out or don't delete anything. Keep everything until you have that policy, and then make sure that your documents and your retention of them align with the policy, and your destruction of them also align with the policy. And you don't need to reinvent the wheel. A lot of school districts, a lot of charter schools have record retention policies. Find a few, look them over, find the format that you like, and then review it and figure it out for your organization, and then follow it.
That's right.
I would also recommend trying to store everything digitally and make sure that you have and this is getting kind of nitty gritty, but store it digitally, but also have a naming structure that is standardized across all documents, so that one person entering information is not different than another person entering a document.
That is so helpful. I think that last part about making sure that you have the record retention, I agree 100%. And then having that naming procedure of documents. So and it doesn't matter if the CFO's in there or the CEO's in there, whoever is going in, that there's a structure that people understand, and then it's maintained. And when you find systems like that are developed early on correctly, it will just save hundreds of hours and stress and frustration, because you just get in a system of organizing and keeping things the way you should. If you don't mind, I'd like to move back to leadership for the last few questions. because you've
Okay.
been, in a leadership role. So you helped found the school. And could you talk a little bit about what that means to be a founder of a school?
It means your heart gets constantly broken and then rebuilt.
Yes. Yeah.
When you help as a founder of a charter school, my husband refers to it as our third child. It is just such a part of you. And even now, I don't work at that school anymore, but I have lifelong friendships from the relationships that started as workplace relationships. From there, I've seen families, like I talked about at the beginning, I've seen families' lives change because they now have a college graduate or multiple college graduates. They go from parents that were working multiple jobs to try to just survive, and now they've got kids that are, in the business world and making really great salaries. They're the generational change, right? Like that's really, really heartwarming. But then, there's the times when it's just like, oh, this isn't working. And it's just like, you thought it was going to work and you have to fix it. So and I guess that's probably the same of anybody that starts a business, right? But the difference with a charter school is, the rewards that you reap are not monetary. It's not like you can build up a business and then sell it and retire on your millions. That's not how it works in the charter school world. So you have to be really willing to live with the wins and know that is your recognition. Sometimes it takes a while to come to terms with that. But if you can know that going in, you can set your expectations appropriately.
Oh. A follow-up to that is, how have you stayed passionate about this work? Because I know you, and you really are very passionate and driven and student focused. How have you stayed passionate about the work?
Because our work's not done.
Yeah.
While I may feel that confident about what is happening in my school, or that I know that's happening in some other schools, right? There are still tens of thousands of students in Pennsylvania that are just on waiting lists for charter schools. There are folks all across the state that want to start charter schools to expand the charter school footprint, and they're getting stymied left and right. And I say left and right, but I don't necessarily mean politically left and right, but I guess you could take it that way, right?
Right.
I really hope that that at some point I'm seeing some glimmers that things are maybe are starting to change. And I hope that truly comes to fruition, so that once and for all, we can just say charters are here.
Yes.
And we've got to figure out the best way from a state perspective, we've got to figure out the best way to support and fund them so that they can do the best job possible for the families that choose them, because those families have the right to choose their kid to go to a charter school. If the work wasn't done, maybe I wouldn't be as passionate.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd be a little more complacent, but it's just not done yet. It's just not done. So we can't take our foot off the pedal. We have to keep pushing to try to bring school choice to as many folks across the Commonwealth that want it.
You did a wonderful job explaining your passion, and it's very inspiring to me, to hear other school leaders like yourself and your wife for doing it, because you're right. There are glimmers of hope. There are things that are changing. We're getting conversations every day about people do want change, and our legislators want change, and they want a unity. They want opportunities, they want innovation, and they want us to work together, because we have been separated for too long, and we all believe in education. Doesn't matter who you walk up to. If you say, do children do better when they have a high quality education? The answer is always yes. Children do better when they go to safe schools. So yeah, these are good things. If the last question I have for you is, if you look down the road 5 years, what would be changed in 5 years that you would say, okay, we have success?
Well, I'll take it from a very big picture perspective, right? if in 5 years we had some collaboration in Harrisburg on how charter schools are fairly funded, and if that issue was put to bed, that would be wonderful, right? That's a pretty big one.
Yes,
I tend to be optimistic,
yes,
but I'm not sure. I guess I've seen too many times where the football has been, like Lucy and Charlie Brown, like where the football has been pulled away. We get close and then it gets pulled away. So I don't know how much hope I hold out for that one. I felt it was a great big win when we got dual enrollment approved for charter schools, because to me that was just a no-brainer that was hanging out there, a low-hanging fruit, that was hanging out there for years and years. It would be great if we came to some sort of collaborate, and this may not even be on anybody's radar yet, but it's something that is a big issue. It'd be wonderful to come to some sort of collaboration regarding special education transportation, with school districts and charters, because I feel like there's probably some money wasted because we're not working together to provide that transportation, and instead we're having public school routes and charter school routes to and from special education placements. So I mean, and that would be a lovely thing to bring some resolution to, because that would only help serve kids better.
That's right. I think there's so many things that we have in common, because if you really start from the conversation of what's best for children, there's many ways that we could collaborate, and we know for sure that whenever you pull another organization to you and you start to collaborate, it saves money in lots of ways, and it brings in more money in lots of ways. It's just a difference in your mindset. You can either work from a poverty mindset, I'm going to keep my little bit, or you operate from a wealth mindset, which means if we all have more, if I share mine with you, now we both have more. And so I think that we are headed there. We have some states, a few states that are out in front of Pennsylvania that are already there. Like you said, they've put the financial conversation, they have a plan. It's equitable to everyone as much as it can be, but it's a more fair funding process. I think that if we could get there, and I agree with you, then collaboration is a no-brainer. If the money's taken out of it, then there's lots of reasons to collaborate.
Exactly. And if I think back on sort of the history of charters in Pennsylvania, I know what changed. Like school districts used to get a subsidy for from the state for every kid that went to a charter school. And before that time, public school districts, they may not have been thrilled about charters, but they did not put up the concerted effort and pressure against charters that they do today. But once that subsidy was taken away, they were fighting for what they felt was their own. And I understand that from their perspective, which is why it needs to come back to the state level for a solution for fair funding and equitable funding for all students who are educated in public schools in Pennsylvania.
Yes. I think that's a great place to end this conversation, but I definitely can think of 10 questions for our next conversation. So I'm hoping you're willing to come back and we can dig in even a little bit deeper for our school leaders. So thank you so much. This was great. I learned a lot.
Oh, you're welcome, Dr. Clark. It was a pleasure spending some time with you, and I'll certainly come back whenever you need me.
Thank you so much.